January. I think I can make this video. Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing the beginning of the year book tag. So I've seen a couple people do this already and I thought it could be fun. I've done a couple book tags before on this channel and I love answering those questions and talking about books and goals that I want to accomplish throughout a year or something that I've already done. You can kind of do whatever. So I sat down and came up with 25 questions to answer for the beginning of the year book tag. We've done this before. This is all familiar. So let's just jump right into it. The first question is, what is your reading goal for 2025? I've talked about this before, but I am hoping to read 60 books this year at a minimum. So I actually read 68 books in 2024. My reading goal for 2024 was only 50 books, but I ended up reading 68. And I really had to question myself whether or not I wanted to push it further and try to do maybe 70 books in 2025 or 80 books. And I just kind of came to the conclusion that I don't really want to put that kind of pressure on myself. I still want reading to be enjoyable and fun, and I want to feel like I can go at my own pace and not constantly have this tracker that's bearing down on me and forcing me to read books maybe that I don't even want to be reading at the time just to hit a number goal. So I ended up just pushing it a little bit farther than my previous year's goal at 60 books. So I feel really good about accomplishing that. And if I happen to read more than 60 books and surpass that goal, I think that's great. I think it's all going to feel like bonus material. But if I don't, I also think that that is okay. I'm saying that now, but potentially if I only read 59 books this year, I'll be extremely disappointed in myself. But that is a problem for future Olive to figure out. So we won't think about that now. The goal for the year is 60 books, sticking to it. That is what we're on track for. The second question is, how has your reading tastes evolved over the last year? And I actually think that they've evolved quite a bit just in terms of genres. So usually I stick solely to fantasy. I've always loved fantasy books, especially young adult fantasy books, but then kind of growing into the more adult fantasy or NA books, and that has been really fun. But at my core, I feel like I am a fantasy reader. I also really enjoy literary fiction though. Most literary fiction books that I read, they're not as thrilling as perhaps a fantasy book is, but I feel like I do glean a lot from it emotionally and intellectually, and those are really fun, and I think a lot of beautiful stories can be told in that genre. So those are the genres that I typically gravitate to, but in 2024, I do feel like I broadened my horizons a bit. I actually read a lot of romance, and I was not a romance reader. I never read it. I think I still kind of lived under the banner of it feeling a little bit taboo and weird to be reading romance. And now I feel like I've completely changed my mind on that. I think romance is actually a very wide genre because you really can just get kind of those cheesy, super cringy, objectively bad books, but they kind of scratch that itch of like watching a Hallmark movie where it's just quick, easy, fun time to read. But then you also have romance books that are super emotional. They can be sad or tragic and they just tug on your heartstrings in the best way. And there's this wide spectrum of everything in between. And that was very fun to discover this year and to discover that I really enjoy reading romance. I also delved into mystery this year a lot more than I have in the past. I'm not typically a mystery reader, and I think it's because I never feel like I have a satisfying ending. Most endings I don't really understand, or it feels like it comes out of nowhere. Everything is built on coincidences and I don't typically enjoy them. Although I did end up reading a couple that I really enjoyed, like The Silent Patient. Most of the mystery books that I ended up reading last year though still didn't necessarily grow my love of the genre. I'm willing to try some more and I'm still planning on reading more in 2025, but there's less of an urge for me to try to find an awesome mystery book because I think I've just landed that I don't really like mystery that much. I want to like mystery, but every book that I've tried has not been kind to me. So if you have any suggestions for mystery books that I should try out, feel free to drop them in the comments because I'm still open. I'm very open-minded about it. Next question is, what is a new genre that you'd like to read more of in 2025? And I think I would like to read more historical fiction in 2025. I actually love historical fiction. There are many of my favorite books that are historical fiction, like All the Light We Cannot See, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, Everyone Brave is Forgiven, Light Between Oceans. I really enjoy historical fiction. I just don't read it that much. And I know I would love to read a lot more historical fiction in 2025. So again, if you have any historical fiction books that you love and think that potentially I would enjoy, feel free to drop that in the comments because I am looking for suggestions. I'm planning on reading The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna pretty early in the year, so that will be great. Next question, what is your most anticipated release of the year? I actually have quite a few few anticipated releases this year. I have to say the one that is front and center in my mind, because it is coming out so early in the year, is Onyx Storm. I think anticipation does not necessarily mean blind excitement. I'm anticipating the book because I'm curious about the direction of the story. I'm curious about the writing style. I'm curious if it will be any better than Iron Flame, because I think Iron Flame was just a bit of a flop for me. I still enjoyed it because I enjoy the series, and I do think I'm pretty good at disassociating between a good book and maybe a fun book that's not as good. And I'm mostly just super curious about Onyx Storm. I also am excited about it, but it's not the only driving factor in my anticipation of it, so it's coming soon. It might already be out by the time this video even releases, but Onyx Storm is up there for me for sure. And then the next question, kind of along those lines, is what is a sequel that you are anticipating this year? I have to say The Strength of the Few, which is the second book in the Hierarchy series. The first one is The Will of the Many, and that was my top book of 2024. I am itching for book 2. There is very little information about it on the internet right now. Goodreads says that the publication date is expected to be sometime in September, so I'm really crossing my fingers that it is actually in September and not just a random date that ends up not being true. I need that book pretty badly. Okay, so a couple more questions about the books that I really want to read this year. What is a book that you are likely to reread this year? Honestly, there's quite a few on the table, but I ended up going with The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. The Night Circus is one of my favorite books of all time. I think it's got to be top 2. Depending on the mood, it could be my favorite book of all time. I don't know. I have reread this book many times. I usually am on an every other year cycle, and I didn't read it last year, so history tells us that I'll probably end up rereading this book this year. I always read it in October. It is the most autumnal, fall vibey book that you have ever read. I love the writing style so much. This is the best use case, one of the only use cases, but the absolute best use case I have ever seen of second person writing. It's so cool. Erin Morgenstern is an absolute wizard with words, and I appreciate all the details in this book, all of the descriptions that go into the environments. The whole thing just feels so thought out and immersive. I am in this world as I'm reading it. It's a beautiful love story with star-crossed lovers and an amazing character ensemble. I have only good things to say about this, and I think that everybody definitely needs to read it. This is probably going to be a reread for me in October because it's been a while. So next is what is a priority read for you in 2025, meaning what is a book that's on my TBR that I'm probably going to read very soon. And again, I had quite a few books that could have fit into this question, but I ended up just choosing one that I got from the bookstore pretty recently and is very much front of mind that I want to read very soon. That is The Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I have never read a Brandon Sanderson book before. I am interested in getting to know his works and kind of delving into some of his series. The problem with me is that I was nervous to just start with a large series and kind of be trapped in something for a long time when it's kind of a new author to me still and I don't know a lot of his work. There's a lot of discourse on the internet of what I should have started with. Some people said Tress of the Emerald Sea, some people said absolutely not because it's very different to his actual writing. It's a standalone fantasy novel that he actually ended up writing for his wife with no intention of ever publishing, but then it ended up getting published. A lot of people have compared this to The Princess Bride, which is my absolute favorite movie and one of my favorite books. It's such a fun time. So that definitely drew me to it. And it's also not super big and I really like the cover and I just kind of wanted to give it a shot. This was also the last copy at my Barnes & Noble, which doesn't really matter to the question, but I don't know why I just thought that I should mention that. So that one is going to be near the top of the list for 2025. Next is what is a book that you wanted to get to in 2024 and weren't able to, so now it's a priority read in 2025. I'm going to say Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. This is the second book in the One Dark Window duology. I really enjoyed One Dark Window. I actually ended up picking up these books just because I love the specialty covers and the stenciling on the sides and I just couldn't not get it. And so I read the first book, I think in November of 2024, and I really enjoyed it. And I want to read the second book pretty soon, especially while the world and the magic system is still pretty fresh in my mind. One of the things I loved about the first book so much is just how unique it is. I haven't read a fantasy novel that had such an original magic system and world building foundation in quite a while. So I really enjoyed that. Something that I want to see from the second book is more character development though, because I think if there's anything that was lacking just a bit in the first one, it was character development and character growth. So I'm really hoping to see more of that, but I am excited to read it and get back into the world. The next question on here is, what is a series that you're looking forward to reading this year? This was actually a tough one for me because I don't have a lot of series on my radar. I'm obviously rereading Throne of Glass right now, and that is absolutely the series that I want to read this year, but I want to try and answer this question with a new series, so I kind of had to look on my shelf and see what was jumping out to me. I actually have the first book in the Spark of the Everflame. No, I guess it's called the Kindred's Curse Saga, but the first book is called Spark of the Everflame. So I do want to read this book and potentially the rest of the series. I don't know. I know this got super popular on TikTok specifically, and I think it was initially an indie published book that you could get on Kindle Unlimited and then got traditionally published, as tends to be the way these days. That happens to a lot of indie books that kind of get fame and fortune from TikTok. So I'm very, very interested in this. I have no idea what to expect from it. I am going to say that this is the series that I think I want to read this year. I do want to read it. I at least want to read the first book, and then we'll see kind of where the rest of it goes. Next question. What is a popular book that you want to read this year? I gotta go with Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I have had this on my TBR for so long. I know that it is kind of quintessential dark academia with a little bit of fantasy thrown in there, and I'm really excited to read it. This is definitely going to be one that I'm going to save for a particular season. I think I gotta read it around September, October, kind of when school is starting up again to get the full experience. But I am very, very excited about this one, and I know it's really, really popular. I've heard so much about Ninth House. I haven't heard a lot about the second book in the series, which I actually don't remember what it's called right now, but it seems like everybody really likes this book. So we're gonna see. It's not gonna be for a while if I get to it, but I do want to read this at some point in 2025. Next question is, what is a non-popular book that you want to read this year? And that was such a hard thing for me to answer because it's very difficult to judge what is a popular or a non-popular book. In my mind, I just ended up choosing a book that I have literally never seen a single person on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or any platform talk about or mention ever, which is Perilous Times by Thomas D. Lee. I picked this up from a bookstore on a whim one day just because I thought the cover was cool and I read the synopsis and was kind of hooked by it. And now that I'm sitting here, I don't fully remember what that synopsis is, but I think that this is kind of a King Arthur book. We're following, I believe, a knight of the Round Table. Oh, yes. Okay, so we are following a Knight of the Round Table, Sir Kay, but he gets reincarnated and reborn every time he dies. And so we're just kind of following along with him and his journey and what happens with him. The reason that I ended up picking this up is because there was an employee tag underneath the book that kind of gave a short synopsis or a reason that they loved the book. The reason that they said they loved this book so much is that it was super funny and comical and made them laugh out loud multiple times, and that is what initially drew me to it. I think don't have any other information on it, but I'm interested in reading it, so I think that's a non-popular book. If you have seen that book around or read that book or seen anything about Perilous Times, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Next is, what is a book you want to read based on the cover? I am susceptible to judging a book by its cover, and I am very susceptible to buying a book based on its cover, so this question was great for me. Kind of difficult because, again, there's a lot of books that could fit this question, but I'm going with a recent edition that I got from Book of the Month, Andromeda. This cover is one of my favorite covers. I absolutely love it. I think that the gold foiling is beautiful. The photo painting is beautiful. I even love that it just says a novel on the front here. It's kind of a bit of a glare, but I just think it's so pretty. Another thing that may be difficult to see is there's like constellations on the back. I don't know if this is going to show up, but there's a very, very faint constellation on the back of this book that I think is super cool. I just think it's gorgeous. So I picked it up because of the cover and because it is a very short book. This is also, I think, a Swedish translated book. I believe the author is from Stockholm, and I think it takes place kind of in the publishing, writing book world. So I'm very excited to read this one. Not just because of the cover, also because it seems like it'd be cool. All right, next question is, what is a book that you currently have on your shelf that you will probably never read? This is a book that somebody actually gave to me, maybe to borrow or maybe to keep permanently. I don't really remember, but I still have it on my shelf, and I'm pretty sure that I'll never read it. It's The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, which is the first book, I think, in the Wheel of Time series, which is a massive series of like 15 books, maybe more. This is the first book, and it's this thick and this tall, and I actually ended up reading, I think, 100 pages of this book, and I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't care about the world. I didn't care about any of the characters. I also didn't want to commit to such a long series that had 15, 16, 17 books in the series. This author died, and his son actually continued the series as well. I think I'm getting that information correct. There's so much going on. There's so many characters. This spans decades, if not hundreds of years, in a world that is very complicated and dense to understand. I did watch the first season of the Amazon Prime show as well, and that was a bummer of a show for sure, and kind of made me not want to read the book even more. And then I ended up kind of going and spoiling some things for myself just to see if I really did want to power through this book, and I don't. I decided that I absolutely don't want to power through this book, so it's still on my shelf. Probably won't be for long, but I don't think I'm ever gonna read this. Sorry to those of you that enjoy it. Next question is kind of similar to the last one, but what is a book that you've owned for years and haven't read yet, but maybe I do want to read it eventually? It's not kind of like the Wheel of Time where I don't think I'll ever read it. I think I will eventually read this, and that is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I think actually what I'm gonna do is read The Secret History by Donna Tartt first to kind of get introduced to the author and the writing style before going to The Goldfinch. I've always wanted to read this book. I've always been interested in the story, but because, again, it's just so thick and dense, I've never really been in the mood to start it just because it feels like such a big commitment, and sometimes I'm just not willing to make that commitment at the time. I don't know. It's just one of those that has sat there for so long on my physical TBR, but I just haven't started it yet. I will read this eventually. I want to read this eventually. I don't know if it's going to be this year, maybe when the urge kind of strikes. I think this is definitely a book where if I read it in the wrong mood, I would not enjoy it, and I want to give it its best chance possible, so I'm kind of waiting for that mood to strike. Next question is, what do you think is a book that you think everyone should read in 2025? You know exactly what I'm going to say. I don't care. I'm going to say it anyway. It's The Will of the Many. Surprise! I don't know what else to say about this. I think everybody should read it. I think that this book specifically can cater to so many different people. I've told people to read this book that don't like fantasy. My mom is reading it right now. I have friends that are reading it that are of all ages, all reading genres that they appreciate. It just feels like it has something for everyone, which is why I can't stop recommending it, because I really truly think that you would just have to not like reading at all to not like this book. That's such a strong statement, and I'm gonna stick to it. I'm sticking to my guns. Read The Will of the Many in 2025. Next question, what is a book that you want to start in 2025 but you're nervous to tackle? I think I'm gonna say Red Rising. I'm nervous for a couple different reasons. I have heard so many good things about this. Specifically, I've heard good things about this from people that don't really like sci-fi, and it's always kind of heralded as the book that is great for people that don't read sci-fi typically, because it kind of gets you in on the ground floor and you can jump into it without having to have a pre-existing enjoyment of sci-fi, which definitely is me. I'm also nervous because this is a series, and something about me is that I have a really hard time starting a series and quitting in the middle of it. It kind of is just like an itch in my brain that never goes away. If I start a series, I want to finish it. I have to get to the end. It's scary to me to start a series because if I don't like the first book, then I just have such a hard time not moving on to the second book at all, which is totally a me thing. I know I need to get better at that and I need to get over it. I will one day. I want to like this series. I want to read the whole thing, but I'm scared that I won't love the first book. I also did try to read it last year. I think kind of in the summertime, I got maybe 50 pages in and realized it was not the time for me to be reading this book at all. And so I stopped, but I don't consider it a DNF because I didn't get very far. And again, I really do want to read this series. I'm just kind of nervous and I want to like it. And so again, kind of with The Goldfinch, I want to give it its best possible shot. So I'm waiting for the perfect mood. That's Red Rising. Next question is, what is a book that you're saving for a specific season this year? I already kind of talked about Ninth House and wanting to save that for October, fall time. And honestly, I don't know if I can say another specific book because I am such a mood reader. So I just know myself. I'm going to be reading romance, happy books in the summer. I'm going to be reading dark academia, mystery, fall cozy vibes in the autumn. I usually read a lot of fantasy in the winter, and that's just kind of something that I do, and I've fallen into that rhythm and routine. And obviously there's plenty of exceptions, but those are the types of genres that I I sort of gravitate towards, and I feel like I'll do the same thing this year. So obviously Ninth House in October. We got an Abby Jimenez book and an Emily Henry book coming out in April that potentially I might save for the summer. No, I won't save it. Maybe I'll reread it in the summer. I'm not going to save it. I'm going to read it immediately. But if it was coming out in the summer, that would fit into that category too. There's lots of possibilities here. I'm not going to say a specific one, but just generally, I am such a mood reader, especially when it comes to seasons. I love kind of associating a book with a season that it fits really well into. I think it just enhances the entire reading experience. So I'm a big fan of that. Next question is, what is a backlist title from an author that you read in 2024 that you want to read in 2025? I gotta say Beartown by Frederick Backman. I read My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry in 2024 and really loved his writing style and just the story that he told and the way he chose to tell it. And I've heard so many good things about many of his books. He has a new one coming out this year as well that I'm excited to read, although that's not a backlist title. So I'm gonna say Beartown by him. I've heard that that's a series, and I actually didn't realize it was a series, but I also think that people just read the first book in it a lot of times too. Either way, I definitely am going to be reading Beartown in 2025. Next question is, what is an author that you won't be reading this year? I am not going to be reading more Lucy Foley books this year. Unless something crazy happens or unless I'm doing it for some sort of video, I really don't think that I'm going to pick up her books again. I did not like her writing style at all. Didn't like the book I read, which was The Guest List, and I've heard that a lot of her books are very similar in the way that she writes her characters and her stories, and I just was so not into it. So I will not be reading Lucy Foley this year. Sorry to anybody that likes her. Okay, I already kind of mentioned my answer to this next question, but what is an auto-buy author for you in 2025? I'm gonna go with Emily Henry. She has a new book coming out, and I just don't care what it's about. I don't care. I know it's gonna be a romance book, but even if she decided to write a mystery book or a biography or a book on the local flora and fauna of Florida, I would still probably buy that book. So Emily Henry. Next question is, who is an author that you've never read before but you want to read in 2025? And I'm gonna go with R.F. Kuang. I really want to read Yellowface this year. I really want to read Babel this year, and I know that there's a new book coming out very soon. I've heard so many good things about her, and I'm really excited to kind of start to dive into her catalog of work. Next question is, what is a bookish goal that you have for 2025? I kind of already talked about this in my reset video earlier this month that I posted, but I want to read 20 books off of my physical TBR, which is pretty much this entire shelf is all books that I have not read that I would like to read. And so I want to read 20 of these books. Doesn't matter when, doesn't matter how. My goal is to just kind of shorten this list a bit. We'll see how far I actually get in it though. Next is, what is a bookish habit that you are leaving behind in 2024? I don't honestly have a lot of book habits that I don't like. I think I am pretty good at just doing what I want to do and making reading enjoyable for myself. Although I think something that I need to get better at in 2025 is not keeping the books that I don't like. On my bookshelf organization video that I posted a little bit ago, I talked about a couple books that I still own that I really didn't like, or maybe some that I own that I know that I won't read, and everybody's like, you have to get rid of them, you have to donate them. And I know I do, and you're all right, and I'll probably be making an unhaul video at some point to get rid of all those books and make space on the shelf. For me, I've just been so focused on building like my personal library, and I wanted to fill the shelves because I loved how it looked visually, even if there are plenty of books on here that I didn't really enjoy or ones that I don't necessarily want in my personal library. I was so focused on quantity and not necessarily quality that I just kept everything, even if I hated it or even if I decided that I will never read that book. So I think I need to get better at curating my shelves a little bit more, even if that means that there will be some more blank spaces on here. All right, we're nearing the end here with our last two questions. The next one is, who are some booktube creators that inspire you? I watch booktube a lot. I don't just create on here. I don't just make videos. I watch it constantly. It's one of the only things I watch on YouTube. It is so comforting to me to see other people talk about the books that they love, and sometimes seeing the overlap between our own content. It's just awesome. So I do have two people that I want to talk about. The first one is Jaime. Jaime is absolutely amazing. She has become easily one of my favorite booktubers ever. I love hearing her talk about books. I love watching her vlogs and her wrap-ups. The thing about Jaime is that she will talk about a book that I have read before, but maybe can't necessarily process very well, or I don't know how to talk about it, or I had this particular feeling about the book that I literally couldn't put put into words. And Jaime will just very concisely say something perfectly. And I'm just sitting there like, that's exactly it. That's what I was feeling this whole time that I couldn't say because I didn't know how to say it. She's such a good communicator, and the way she talks about books is just so great. So please go watch her, go subscribe to her. She's absolutely amazing. Another booktuber that I watch pretty religiously is Jolie. Jolie is so funny in her videos. It feels like a warm hug just watching all of her content. It's like sitting down with a friend, hearing them talk about their favorite books, or maybe not their favorite books. I think she's just really, really great and has amazing content on her channel as well. So go watch her if you want to honestly just laugh and giggle and kick your feet and have a good time. Both of these creators are so wonderful. I'm gonna link their channels in the description below. Go check them out for sure. And the last question I have is what to expect from this channel in 2025. Honestly, I'm gonna kind of just keep doing what I've been doing the last year. I am almost exactly 1 year on YouTube, which is absolutely crazy. In the beginning, I was posting about once a month, maybe twice a month, just because it was a lot to sort of figure out in the beginning. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to create content, how to talk about books. I was just kind of doing what felt right. And as the year progressed, I feel more comfortable with things. I feel more comfortable with creating content and posting more frequently. So I will be posting once a week as best as I can, maybe even a little bit more if there is enough content and videos and time on my side of things. I want to be doing more reading vlogs this year. I want to be doing more challenges as well, like the 24-hour reading-a-thon, which is a very scary concept to me, but I think it would be really fun to attempt and try to tackle. But mostly I just want to ask you guys, what do you want to see from the channel? If there's any ideas that you have, any books you want me to read, I actually love that. I love being able to engage in the comments with you and talk about the books that we're reading, and you guys are also kind and nice, and so let me know what you want to see throughout the rest of the year. So that's it. That is the beginning of the year book tag. Please chime in and answer some of these questions as well. I would love to hear from you guys, what genres you're planning on reading, some of your anticipated releases, authors that you love, books you won't be reading. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me on this corner of the internet, and we will see you next time.